Welcome to another episode of the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host, and on this episode, I am thrilled to have Kevin Cole on the show. He's a football analytics expert, and he is the founder of Unexpected Points. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. How's your early football season going?
I mean, it's going good. The NFL, it isn't totally unique in this regard, but there's a certain level of noise that you get year round, especially, with the months lead up going to the NFL draft and then all the free agency and then the storylines, training camp, preseason. But nothing's actually happened, right? Like nothing's actually happened for the next season. It's all a bunch of opinions, which will be forgotten if they're wrong. The day the season starts. So it's good to have some actual stuff happening that we can then adjust our expectations and try, I should say, to have some more well-balanced and predictive takes going forward for the rest of the season.
Yes, and we're going to get into that with week one. The Football Analytics Show is brought to you by the 60-Minute Guide to the 2024 football season. This is my audiobook that contains 2 deep dive stories that apply analytics to football betting. To learn more, go to thepowerrank.us. That is a URL that will take you to a place on my site, The Power Rank, where you can learn more about how you might be able to listen for free on Spotify. Once again, that's thepowerrank.us. Kevin, let's get into it. We have week one. We actually got to watch some football. What were your biggest takeaways from week one, and what are people overreacting to?
Well, I mean, I think you want to try and have a measured perception on what happened in week one. Try to sort out the more high variance type of plays or things that could have happened. Try not to be too results based. So that's kind of the general approach. But I would say the biggest problem that people have is using week one for massive confirmation bias. So we all have our ideas coming into the season. And I think when you look at certain results, I'm just going to be a little bit more tempered than some people. I did a buy, sell, hold type of podcast for week one earlier this week with Josh Hermsmeyer, who I have on the pod, who's worked at 538 and other places on Tuesday. And my first thing that I mentioned is, not that I don't like exciting football, but I was selling a bit of Anthony Richardson's performance that he had just because it's going to get shared massively. There's so many people who want to see him be a big thing going forward. And, 3 50-yard plus completions in one game where you only complete 9 passes in total, you're gonna get some pretty good numbers based upon that. But it's just really looking at the sustainability going forward. So it's things like that. It's things that people are seeing this evidence, they're getting super excited about it, and I'm gonna maybe temper the enthusiasm a bit on it.
Yes, absolutely. I do have Anthony Richardson in my fantasy league, so I hope there is a little bit more enthusiasm than what you're talking about.
Well, he will rush the ball. He rushed the ball, so I'll give you credit for that. It's just passing a little bit, and also when it comes to the confirmation bias, it can work the other way too. I mean, for instance, I think a good pairing to put together would be the week one performances for Caleb Williams at home against the Titans, who weren't great last year. Who knows? They could have a great defense this year, so we don't really know. And then Bo Nix on the road against the Seahawks. Not that the Seahawks are great, but Seattle's a difficult place to play in. I mean, at least when you look at the numbers for their performances, their efficiency was basically the same, bad for both of them. Their PFF grading was basically the same, pretty bad for both of them. And then I have some adjusted efficiency numbers. And when you adjust them, Nix comes out a little bit above Caleb Williams. Now, there's a lot of people who I follow who are big Caleb Williams backers and Bo Nix haters. So guess what they're talking about after week one? They're talking a lot about Bo Nix and how difficult it is. And then they're kind of ignoring what's going on with Caleb Williams. So you got to take in the evidence for everyone. Also, you can't just pick and choose which guys you want to see the evidence for and which ones you don't.
For sure. I was thinking about Caleb Williams because a lot of my metrics had Chicago at NFL average heading into the season. And I thought that was kind of crazy. There's obviously a lot of expectations for Caleb Williams. He does have a really nice set of receivers. But think back to all the other top picks at quarterback in the NFL, right? Like what are they, right? The Kyler Murrays, the Trevor Lawrences of the world. It's a large hill to climb, even if you're the number one pick, right?
Yeah, it's a large hill. I mean, on average, you're probably going to be in the bottom half of the NFL. The thing with the Bears is, and this maybe displayed itself a little bit on Sunday, is they had the best defense in the NFL by some metrics, especially against the pass. The second half of last year, after the Sweat trade, so that probably plays into a bit. But yeah, I think people are getting a little too aggressive on Caleb Williams, at least early in the season. I mean, even CJ Stroud struggled mightily in his first start last year against the Ravens. And I think he had some problems in preseason that people were talking about. And then they break out and they're big. So it's not that like you could just pencil in a number one pick for average performance, but they could be really, really good, like a CJ Stroud or a Justin Herbert. But even then, your upside is maybe the 10th best quarterback in the NFL, at least in a rookie year. And if they settle in around average or less than average, but not worst quarterback in the NFL, you could still be happy going forward.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit about your adjusted quarterback numbers that you had for Caleb Williams and Bo Nix. Can you take us through how you do that and what it says about not only those two quarterbacks, but any other surprises that you had for week one?
Yeah, so it is based on the data that comes in. So my main data source is this thing called NFL Read R, which is it comes through an R. R is the programming package, so that's the R on the end rather than ER on the end. But basically, it's from the NFL API, their play-by-play data. Everything comes in. You get certain things like air yards and yards after the catch, which comes in very handy here. And you also get a calculation for expected points added. People who listen to this podcast probably know what that is, but it's the best way to value the contribution towards actually scoring points on a play-by-play basis. So you have all of that. And then I also have data that I'm bringing in from a company, FTN Data, and that gives me a few other things. It gives me interception-worthy passes, so ones that are dropped by defensive backs. It gives me drops for the receivers on your team. And then it also gives some information on like contested catches, which I like to put into it because that can affect what your expectations are there. So I go through and I make a series of adjustments. Some of them are pretty intuitive. I try to add back the value that's lost on drops, or if a team has a lower than expected drop rate, subtract some value for having receivers who are making all their catches. I try to subtract for interceptions that should have happened to at least to some degree. But even interception-worthy throws are only intercepted like 40% of the time. So you can't assume every single dropped interception would be caught by a defensive back 100% of the time because we kind of see that doesn't happen. I look at fumble recovery luck. I look at weather, strength of schedule, and then also yards after catch that's higher than expected. And I think there's some benefit in looking at that. Like some of that's the quarterback placing the ball on timing and good ball placement. Some of that is scheme. Some of that is the receivers making huge plays. So I do knock quarterbacks who derive most of their production from yards after the catch, or a higher proportion of their production from yards after the catch than through the air versus other quarterbacks.
Excellent. So obviously the yards after catch is going to dock Anthony Richardson, right? Because of those three long plays.
Well, you know what? Two of the three plays were all in the air. So no, they don't dock him. They're actually pretty happy about that. One of them was a longer yards after catch, but the other ones, I mean, he was just chucking that thing. So let me see. He actually looks pretty good. He has a negative 0.5 EPA for yards after catch, so not too much there. Now, someone who is hurt, for instance, Jalen Hurts, the no pun intended. He's hurt by the yards after catch, mostly because of the A.J. Brown touchdown that was early in the second half where he caught it, lost Jair Alexander, and then just ran it all the way for a touchdown. Now, it was a good ball placement by Hurts, but there's not a lot of receivers in the NFL who are taking that all the way for the score. And the interesting thing about this measure is Brock Purdy is actually gaining back some value in this category, where normally he's getting incredible yards after catch over expectation, which has knocked him down in previous years. This year, it's not the case. So this is the first year, I know we're only 1 week into the year, but the first year where he's getting a big positive adjustment up with all these adjustments. Normally he gets a big negative adjustment, which actually puts him to the top of the NFL for this week in his efficiency, whereas he would have been in the 5th, 6th sort of range without the adjustments.
And then with Caleb Williams and Bo Nix, which quarterback got the positive bump from your analysis?
Well, Bo Nix got the positive bump, and again, this is because of not getting any yards after the catch. And I saw some metrics out there that at the catch point, according to the next gen sort of numbers, which aren't exactly what I'm using, but it's going to reflect what I'm using, that the receivers had the lowest amount of separation at catch. Now, again, I don't give him all the credit for the yak that should have happened there, because sometimes it's like it's not targeting the right receiver on these sorts of plays. So maybe you could put some of that on Bo Nix, but that's reflected in this. He gets a bump up for not getting much yak. And again, it does comport with the NFL's tracking data, which shows that his receivers did not get much separation at the catch point.
Interesting. Kevin, over at Unexpected Points, you also run these advanced reviews where you're looking back at games. Give us a sense for what you do, and maybe we can use Lions and Rams as an example there.
Sure. So what I have is a way of trying to say, okay, if we look at the stuff with the most signal, that has the most stickiness, let's say week over week or year over year, let's emphasize that stuff and let's downweight the stuff that doesn't have as much stickiness. And it's similar in a way to the adjusted quarterback numbers, but it's going to apply across the entire team. So of course, something like fumble recovery luck will be one of the least sticky things, but yet fumbles are massively impactful on games. In particular, because if they're coming from running plays, they're normally coming from very advantageous down and distance situations. So they'll be really negative because the team is in a really good position before they end up losing the ball. And then other things that could come into it: special teams plays, penalties get downweighted quite a bit. And I also look at something fairly generic, like how often a team is successful. So their success rate, which is just looking at every play on a binary basis and saying, did it gain expected points added or not? And maybe giving that a little bit more credit rather than just looking at the EPA per play, which can be highly influenced by a handful or even one or two outlier plays during the game. And I place more emphasis on whether or not a team could be consistently successful than those outlier plays. Looking at the game that you're talking about, and again, I do a separate post for all the island games, and then I group together the early and late windows on Sunday. So looking specifically at the Rams-Lions game, it was one of the two games this week where the adjusted score has a different result than the actual score. It showed the Rams as being 1 point better, according to this adjusted score, than the actual result. And of course, that makes some sense. It was an overtime game. The Lions got the coin toss. The Rams never got a chance to respond. But if you even look beyond that, the teams were roughly successful on a play-by-play basis, yet the Rams leaned a little bit more into the pass than the Lions did. And the Lions had a 98th percentile in their rush EPA per play. So that's seen as being a little bit more of an outlier type of outcome, versus the Rams were about a 65th percentile in their passing EPA, which ended up driving their results. So the adjusted scores are telling you, you know what, I think the Rams continuing at about a 65th percentile clip and being able to replicate that is probably more sustainable than the Lions being bad throwing the ball and being at the 98th percentile running the ball. And that's going to be the way that they're going to sustain their production.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking. So you mentioned success rate, and you define it in terms of positive EPA. I do it differently, but it's absolutely the stickiest thing I found to look at, and more so than things like yards per pass attempt, and I would assume EPA has the same type of problem with these big plays, like making too much of a contribution. I'm looking at some of my numbers. I mean, 71% success rate on rushing plays for the Lions. That doesn't seem sustainable.
It was kind of insane. It's kind of insane how well that they were doing there. And then, well, one other thing that I do in this, so I have breakdowns of the quarterback stats. I have the top 10 plays on EPA gained or lost on an absolute value basis. You can see exactly which plays are driving everything. I have all the different metrics. And then I also, in certain games, discuss fourth down and decision making. So for this particular game, I had a little bit of a discussion here about a call that Dan Campbell made to punt the ball. Now, it was on his own side of the field, but there were only, I think, 4 minutes left in the game, down by 3 at that point, which was a negative win probability move. Now, he got everything that he needed. He got the quick stop, he got the score, and he got the coin toss, and he got the touchdown in overtime. So, results based, you could say he made the right decision. But I also go through decisions too and kind of explain why the win probability model in this circumstance said they lost about 4.5% win probability punting the ball in that situation rather than trying to go for it, even on their own side of the field.
Right. And it seems, that's a very non Dan Campbell thing to do. So we'll see if that continues forward. The other thing about this game, I'm looking at Matthew Stafford, 47% passing success rate in my numbers compared to an NFL average that's usually closer to 42. That's pretty good. He threw the ball 50, or he dropped back 51 times, which is kind of incredible as well. Kevin, I know you use this type of analysis to kind of fuel your projections moving forward. Maybe tell us a little bit about how that works. And I'm actually particularly interested in what it says about the Rams at Arizona next week.
Yeah, so it builds into a model where rather than using something like straight EPA per play, offensively or defensively, as the foundation for the model, I'm going to use these adjusted scores and these adjusted EPA per play offensively and defensively as the foundation for the model. So it's maybe doing some of the work that you would do outside of that to adjust for plays that have higher variance and take those out. It's kind of already taken out of the adjusted score, so I'm using that. And when I project going forward, also a huge thing that's done in there is I use these metrics in a strength of schedule type of calculation. So I'm going to go back, look at strength of schedule. I did all this work based upon the last 2 years of data, with obviously the most recent data being highly weighted versus earlier weeks are decayed out, their importance over time. And then I projected forward going into this season. And then now that we have a week's worth of data, most of my strength of schedule type adjustments for this first week are based upon what happened last year when it comes to defenses and offenses. But some of it starts to be built in what's happening this year. And at least at this point of the season, and I know people are all over the place as far as what they're weighting, but it's going to be somewhere in the between 95-5 or 90-10 weighted towards what's happened and what my idea was of these teams last year versus what they've shown us so far this year. And then that'll be continue to be phased out, where once we get to about halfway through the season, it's almost entirely based upon what's happened this year, with a little bit still coming from last season. And the specific game that you're talking, I'm sorry, which game were you talking about again?
Well, Rams at Arizona. My hypothesis is that people are tending to underestimate the Rams right now. I think part of it is that Puka Nacua is hurt. They have a ton of other injuries on both sides of the ball, offensive line, so on and so forth. I'm looking at the Arizona Cardinals, who I still believe to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, favored at home against the Rams. That's not what I have, and I was just wondering what your analysis said.
Yeah, actually, we align here. So, I'm pulling up 1.5 points for the Cardinals, so it's kind of like, which you're not really getting. You're stuck between the threes there, so it's not super exciting. And I have the Rams being better by about 1.5 points, even including a home field advantage going over to the Cardinals. But again, a lot of this is based upon what happened last season for the Cardinals. I do give them a pretty significant adjustment up for the fact that Kyler Murray is now playing, and they didn't have him for the first half, and they had him maybe hampered for the second half of last season. So that's built into this projection too. But yeah, I have this line being off by about 3 points. Now it is between the threes though, so maybe it's not as much of a great value as it would be if it was something where you're crossing over one of the key numbers.
So you have this by Rams by a point
It
and a
should be
half.
Rams. I'm saying it should be Rams favored by 1.5 is what I have.
Interesting. I have the Rams by a lot more. So I think
how much more do we have the Rams by?
I have them by 5.1, and
Wow.
I'm not. I'm actually going through this thing.
You
where
hate the Cardinals. You hate the Cardinals. That's what it comes to. You
I just
short,
don't think
short
they're very
bias.
good. I just
don't have
think they're very
heightism.
good.
Don't have heightism
What?
against Kyler Murray.
No, I have like defensive backism and like defensivism, right? Like, like
no, but I agree with you. The Puka Nacua thing. It's like he's cool, but Cooper Kupp's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Now it was interesting, Cooper Kupp in that game. I think I highlighted the fact that he wasn't exactly stretching the field when it came to his receptions, but
Nope.
still, he's going to be at fantasy. If you want to pivot over to fantasy, God, I hope you drafted Cooper Kupp in your league. You've already made massive profit there. I mean, until he gets like injured this week or something,
Right,
but
exactly.
but
And like,
he's going to be hugely valuable these next couple weeks.
well, and his 40% target share, even for Cooper Cup, even without Puka Nakua, is not going to continue, right? So, like, where does that level out?
No, but 30% could continue, and that's going to be about as good
Yeah,
as anybody.
that is definitely true. Kevin, do your numbers show any value in any other week 2 game that you find interesting?
Okay. God, there's some ugly ones. So my numbers, I hate my own numbers. Okay, let me just tell you that, which is maybe means that they're good. So, oh God, this is so disgusting. It shows some value on the Carolina Panthers, and I know that like everyone has them as the worst team in the NFL, and I guess my numbers just aren't quite ready to say that they're the worst team in the NFL. So the fact that they're 6.5 point dogs at home against the Chargers, who I'm a little bit skeptical of. I had it about an even game. The Chargers and the Raiders, I had that being almost an even game. They weren't at that dominant in a game that they should be pretty dominant in. Um, it's one of those ones where you're betting on the chance that the Panthers are not like everyone, again, this confirmation bias sort of thing. Everyone was down on the Panthers coming in. They put up a complete stinker against a mediocre Saints team, and now they're just completely dead to everyone. So maybe a little bit there, which is again, I'm not happy about it, but it's happening. And the other one would be looking at the Patriots at home against the Seahawks. The Patriots are 3.5 point dogs, and my numbers are just low on the Seahawks. They have been low on the Seahawks. I just don't see them as being as good offensively as some others do. I guess I'm not as big of a Geno Smith fan as some other people are. And I mean, my numbers aren't as big of a Geno Smith fan. Nothing personally against him. And with Jacoby Brissett, I mean, my numbers just really like Jacoby Brissett. So I don't know what to say. The fact that he's starting this year, I know it wasn't the longest sample, but he was really, really good when he played in Cleveland before Deshaun Watson came back. I bet they wish they would have kept him in there ever since and maybe have him there right now. And not that that will continue forever going forward, but we saw how he can get some scramble plays. He can just not make mistakes. And I think for the very least, with the defense playing well, they can keep the game close.
Absolutely. I mean, I think New England kind of had to start Jacoby Brissett. I mean, I wasn't very
Yes.
high on Drake May coming into the season, and you have like a good vet like Brissett. Like, don't the Green Bay Packers wish they would have signed this guy and had him on the roster right now?
The Packers are
But
crazy. That situation with Malik Willis, who, like, you talk about a backup, and you say this guy is, this guy's the 33rd best quarterback in the NFL, and you're happy. Like
oh my
Malik
god,
Willis might be like the 200th best quarterback in the world or something. Like I don't even know where this guy fits in.
it's kind of crazy. Actually, I want to get to the Packers because my question for you was, what kind of adjustment would you make? Jordan Love is listed as doubtful, but that guy's not playing, right? They have
No,
to go with Malik Willis, who arguably might be better than Sean Clifford, who is the next option in that Packers
I mean
quarterback
if they
room.
just run like a triple option offense, I think Malik Willis could be pretty good.
Right. Now, Malik Willis, before I let you answer the question, Malik Willis is pretty interesting because last year when Tennessee was playing Baltimore in London, Mike Vrabel, I think he was down 8, and he had a 3rd and goal from like the 20, and he decided to kick a field goal instead of letting Malik Willis run another play, which doesn't make any sense to me. Still doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know if it makes any sense to you.
Well, if it's before the 2 minute warning or there's a timeout issue, there is this whole thing of you score and then stop the clock and then you can get the ball back and score again kind of situation since you need 2 scores anyway. But if they're down 8, and then I don't know if that quite makes sense.
I don't remember how much time was left.
But I have seen that before. There is like a kick it before. Let's say you only have like 1 or 2 timeouts left. You kick it before the 2 minute warning
Oh, yeah, so
to
then you
score
have the extra
quickly. You
timeout,
use the
yeah.
2 minute warning when the other team has the ball to get an extra timeout, and then you have a chance to get the ball back again since you're going to need 2 scores anyway, and you just have to get a touchdown on the last drive. But again, it's a very specific scenario that you would want to do it.
Interesting. My question for you, Kevin, is how would you make an adjustment from Jordan Love to Malik Willis?
Well, what's interesting is I think the biggest adjustment I've ever seen in the betting, at least from the betting markets, was when Aaron Rodgers went down, and then God, why is his name escaping me? The UCLA quarterback who I actually had
Yes.
some hope for. Oh, Hundley, Brett Hundley came
Yep.
in. I actually had some hope for a fifth round pick. Brett Hundley came in. And I think the movement was like 7.5 points or eight
Hmm.
points or something
Yeah.
like that. And I was saying to myself, this is absurd. It can't be that big of a difference. And it was probably more like 10 points when it came down to how much worse the Packers were. So I mean, I have it in the neighborhood of 5.5 points, maybe up to 6 points, just because I'm so low on Malik Willis. But who knows? It could be even more than that. But it's not Aaron Rodgers going out, but it's a pretty big deal.
And what are you basing that on? I mean, we don't have a ton of data on Willis, so are you using some kind of draft prior, or what's the reasoning behind it?
Yeah, I'm using draft prior, which isn't great, along with the tiny bit of evidence that we have. And I do admit that for this one, I put a little manual adjustment in there for the fact of he's not been able to even functionally pass the ball at all when he's in there in the NFL. So I have done that a little bit. I admit it's not the most scientific thing, but not being able to play quarterbackedness comes in a little bit in this particular discussion. And it is wild to me that that was their backup plan, because I don't quite understand what the upside is with having Willis even on the team. I don't know. There's been talk about Ryan Tannehill, but that probably can't happen for this week. But that would seem like a pretty good choice for me. But maybe Tannehill's more interested in going into a situation where he can finish the season as the starter if someone gets injured.
I think if you're Ryan Tannehill, you have to do whatever the heck gets you on an NFL team, kind of like the
Well, he
um,
got a good contract. He got paid pretty big time by the Tennessee Titans after he was, sent over there for a ham sandwich from the Miami Dolphins. He got a really, really good contract. I think he had the highest cap hit in the NFL, one or two different seasons. So he's sitting on enough cash where he could probably be a little bit choosy.
right. I kind of wonder if Green Bay just got off on the cheap signing Malik Willis, right? Like,
Yeah, that could be part of
like
it.
if you could get like a Tyrod Taylor.
That's a good point. I mean, a good backup quarterback is probably going to cost you, I mean, almost $10 million a year. So that's significant in the context of the entire cap structure in the NFL. So you're right. That might have something to do with it.
Kevin, before I let you go, give us a surprising prediction for the remainder of the 2024 NFL season.
Okay, well, this is going to be one that has potential to completely blow up in my face, which I think is
I
probably the
love it.
best when it
Love it.
comes to surprising predictions. So for this one, the surprising prediction is going to be that Kirk Cousins is going to still finish the season as a top 10 quarterback in efficiency, despite the fact that I guess he can't move or something is the new thing for him. That like he can't go under center, and he literally did not move out of a half of a yard radius when he was back there throwing. I don't know. I had them being as a little bit better than what the numbers say, maybe even a little bit better than the Steelers in this game. And I had them also, just having a tough time with TJ Watt and the pass rush. So I think going forward with the weapons, with everything else they have, he'll be okay. I've heard this conspiracy theory that the reason they drafted Penix was because they knew that Cousins was washed, but I don't know. That just doesn't make sense to me, since they made this deal for Cousins in mid-March. They would have had to have been already thinking about Penix by mid-April at the latest to draft him in late April. And I guess I just don't see that much changing in that little time, where we have months to go before the season starts, that they would somehow know at that point that Kirk Cousins is washed. So I don't know. I'm not buying into conspiracy theories about the fact that he can't move around at all. And I think he'll loosen up a little bit in these next couple of weeks. And with that offense and those offensive weapons, I think they can come back and they'll cruise and hopefully win the division still, even with the Saints having a monstrous win in Week 1 over the Panthers.
I had Atlanta with by far the easiest schedule this preseason, being in that division. I think they get like the Eagles and Dallas at home. No, I think that maybe they're at Dallas. I think they get like the Chiefs and the Chargers at home. It's
Yeah.
pretty crazy, right?
They
So
they got a sweet schedule, but with those performances from the Bucks and the Saints, I think people are very down on Atlanta. So Atlanta was one of my holds, and Kirk Cousins was one of my buy sell hold. I'm just holding. I'm still holding on the fact that I wasn't as enthusiastic as maybe some were about the Falcons going into the season. But at the same point, it's also I'm not going to completely flip on them like a lot of people seem to have done after 1 week against a fierce pass rush and a really good back end too for the Steelers. I mean, sometimes that just happens in week one. That your offense is completely flustered and it doesn't work out so well. So I'm not going to write them off at this point.
we started with overreactions to week one, and I think we ended on one. So you are not overreacting to Atlanta, and I definitely see that in my numbers as well. Kevin Cole, thank you so much for joining me on the Football Analytics Show. Please let everyone know where they can get your work.
Sure, it's unexpectedpoints.com. It's hosted on Substack, but I paid the little GoDaddy money to get my own URL there, so Elon won't throttle my tweets with Substack in there. So it's on Substack. Free posts are in there. There's also a paid posts that are part of this. You can get the year-long subscription, the monthly, the whatever, and then I also have a podcast. Some of those may be paywalled on the podcast, but most of them are for free. And then everything's for free for the podcast on YouTube. And again, Unexpected Points is the YouTube channel where we go live with Hermsmeyer every Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern time. I take questions, all that sort of stuff.
Musk doesn't like Substack?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know if it's the most interesting, but Substack came out with this feature they called Notes, where they look just like tweets, basically, that you could send amongst Substack people. And I guess Elon got wind of that and then decided to, retribution to whenever you put a Substack URL in, the image wouldn't pop up. The image automatically pops up for it, and it would just be a URL with no image. And supposedly there was something also in the formula where they have certain things in the formula to either bolster or lower the shareability of things. Supposedly anything with a Substack URL was also being throttled down in the formula. But for sure, we saw the fact that the image previews were not popping up on anything with Substack in the URL. So as long as you just take Substack out of the URL by getting your own URL there, it works, even though it is going to a Substack site.
I love promoting a small business in the social media era. It just gives me just great pleasure. Kevin Cole, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ed.
You've been listening to the Football Analytics Show. My name is Ed Fang, your host. Just a reminder, you can check out the 60-minute guide to the 2024 football season. It is my audiobook. You can learn about how you might be able to listen for free on Spotify. Check that out at thepowerrank.us. You can also grab my newsletter, 5 Nugget Saturday, which is my curated list of tips and analytics. Check that out at thepowerrank.com. Once again, my name is Ed Fang, and I will talk to you again next week.